Bushwick, which is this very strange little movie, and it's not been brilliantly reviewed. I think it's been sort of rather unfairly received. The story is basically, you remember in Birdman, there was that thing about this is all playing out in one take. You know, it looks like it's all, it's all, and so it's not all one take, but it gives you the feeling that it's going to be. We start off with Brittany Snow and her boyfriend arriving in the station in Bushwick. They're having a conversation. They get off in one take. Suddenly, a guy who's on fire comes pelting down the stairs and expires. What on earth is going up? The boyfriend goes, he says, "I'll be back in a minute." And so that's the end of him. She then goes up to street level where warfare has broken out. People in these black uniforms, fighting, shooting. The whole thing is completely disastrous. So she then runs down the street, breaks into a house, and comes into Dave Bautista, who you saw most recently.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
He gets all the best lines in Guardians of the Galaxy. He's a janitor. He used to be in the military, saw too much death. Now he's a janitor. So terrible situation. What on earth is going on?
I don't know.
It's warfare. Nobody knows what's going on until finally they manage to capture one of these men in black and, tear off his helmet and say, who are you and what are you doing?
Where are you from? Kentucky, sir.
You're an American. What's going on?
Texas is seceding from the United States. By the order of the fathers of the new American coalition, we are a united force with the goal of establishing an independent nation free from government tyranny and the right to live our lives the true American way.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Sir?
Who's we?
Texas, Louisiana, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, West Virginia, Georgia are with us. Parts of Maryland, Pennsylvania are on the brink.
It's like a new civil war?
Sir, we're good men from those states.
Yeah, we're a private army.
Mercenaries.
What's the plan?
We'll force Congress to ratify the secession.
Well, how are you gonna do that?
This is how we're gonna do that. Insurgency.
So it turns out that, this is it's secession. It's about, America dividing. And here's the really weird thing. It's a stripped down, fairly low budget production. As I said, that kind of thing about, single handheld takes. They're not completely unedited. There are edits in it, but it's sort of, long, just literally just what's in the shot. So people have drawn comparison with this and Cloverfield. Actually, I think there's a comparison between this and the work of George Romero, because for a start, particularly in the world in which we're in at the moment, in which the news has been full of stories about neo-Nazis and Ku Klux Klan and, the rise of the South and all those ideas which, clearly have suddenly become in the news since the film has been made. When the screening that I was in finished, a colleague turned to me and said, only partly joking, wow, they didn't think they were making a documentary when they made that, did they? I mean, it's an exploitation movie, and it's a movie which, it has its limitations. Some of the performances aren't great. Some of the script is, rather on the nose, although Nick Nowitzki is involved in the screenplay, and I've always been a fan of his. But it is a film with an absolute horror social underpinning. The idea that they have, because Brittany says his character says, why would anyone invade Bushwick? And he says, because we didn't think there'd be very much resistance. Why wouldn't there be much resistance? Because it's ethnically diverse, because it's people who are outsiders, because it's all the people who aren't the sort of, the white supremacists. And that's why I make the comparison with George Romero. I think that although George Romero might not have been completely convinced by the filmmaking itself, he would have seen in it a kindred idea, the idea of taking genre trope, a horror trope, and using it for something which is, very clearly a sort of political parable that, as it happens, at the moment, seemed all the more sort of chillingly on the nose. It's not a great film, but it's not a bad film either. It's a little, if I'd seen it just on DVD or it had been on television or something, I can't imagine anybody is going to see it in the cinema, to be honest with you. But if you catch it on the small screen, it is not without a certain degree of interest. Not least because making a drama about that subject right now, as I said, this, events will have overtaken it. Just gives it an edge that George Romero would have. If you're a fan of Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, and you're a fan of the way in which George Romero always used horror with a very specific sort of satirical, political edge, I think you'll see some of that at least in Bushwick.